Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are picking up with the Kripke years, part 2. There was just too much to fit in one episode, so here we are back again to talk about the showrunner and the episodes that he wrote and directed. But first, let my wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a fan of Supernatural since season 3. I started writing fanfic under Fire Sign 10 in 2012. I'm the co-host of the podcast, So Get This, The Lore of Supernatural Fanfiction. And as Ellis Colton, I am an MM romance writer.
Okay, Lynn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University and a passionate Supernatural fan from the beginning. I've written a bunch of books on the show, including the most recent 2 written with the cast of Supernatural. The actors wrote their chapters about their perspective on what it's all been like for them.
And I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all of my modern day worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I haven't been a fan as long as some people, but I have tried very hard to make up for it with obsession. So
And you have succeeded.
I think I hit the mark maybe, or overshot. It's that overachiever thing, only child. So we got through the first 3 seasons. But let's start with season 4. There were 3 episodes that Kripke wrote in season 4, Lazarus Rising, Lazarus Rising, Heaven and Hell, and Lucifer Rising. And Lucifer Rising, he was also a director for. Carole, start us off. You can take one episode or all 3.
I think in a general note, he certainly chose wisely because it's the season opener, the mid-season finale, which is always that kind of penultimate point where you're heading into winter hiatus of like 2, 3, 4 months, and you need to carry that suspense over. And then, of course, the season finale. And for Supernatural, those were really pivotal points because at that point in time, Supernatural was constantly on the bubble, as in we never knew if it was going to be renewed. So we would spend the late spring and all through summer in suspense, waiting to find out, did they get renewed? So certainly, I think him choosing those episodes was definitely very, very purposeful, very on purpose. For Lazarus Rising, of course, we left off really in a big hurry because season 3 ended so quickly and abruptly due to the writer's strike. They had to really kind of hurry it up, throw things together a little more, and boom, hey, Dean's dead and in hell. Okay. Where we last see him on these terrible hooks, suspending him
Calling out for Sam.
Just screaming for Sam. So we start off season 4 with here's Dean in his coffin, clawing his way out and through the earth and up into the sunlight. Great behind the scenes stuff where Jensen talks about going through this, and basically Kripke was like, yeah, suck it up, Buttercup. So it's really a rebirthing in a really visceral sense. The earth gives birth to Dean. He claws himself out of it and back into the world. He has to back up with Bobby. He has to meet, back up with Sam. Sam's shacked up with some chick who says, are you, and he's like, and of course they're like, no, we're brothers. Uh, Ruby always knew a little more than she let on. So there was a lot going on. They had to really kind of quickly reestablish the dynamic of what is happening with the brothers, what is happening with the story arc, where they had to like so quickly, tie things up to a point where they could move on to a new season. And there's a lot of threads that Kripke had to weave together. And of course he does. I mean, this is his strength in terms of writing. He can take several complex things going on, complex relationships, complex action, and weave them into something solid where we can catch up and move on in a cohesive way and are totally invested. We're totally back into what's going to happen. What happened to Dean in hell? Who, Sam doesn't really hook up with chicks, so kind of who is this chick? But, Sam and Dean rebonding. What is happening with Hell and Lilith, and what happened with all those things? Where is all that going to go? So it's a really satisfying episode, but at the same time, launches us into the whole new arc for season 4.
Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pivotal episode. And I think, the Kripke years, everybody talks about how directly involved he was, how present he was in the writer's room, and how much he cared about the show and wanted to shepherd it. And I think you can see that in this season. He has the first episode and the last episode, and that mid-season episode too. Like, he really wanted to caretake those really important pivotal episodes. Um, Something that really stands out to me about Lazarus Rising is it has a lot of really memorable scenes. And I think that's because of Kripke's writing, because of the acting, but it's also because it's Kim Manners directed. So we still had Kim Manners, and we won't have him for very much longer, but you can so see Kim Manners' touch in Lazarus Rising in some of the memorable scenes. When Dean does dig himself out of the grave, it's such a dramatic scene. And there's that typical Kim Manners, that dramatic crane shot where you pull up and you see that the trees have just been mashed down all around the grave. I mean, I just remember watching that and my jaw just falling open to see that. What else did I really like? There's that really, not that I like it, but there's that really dramatic scene where they go to Pamela Barnes, which really interesting, fascinating character that I loved. And she tries to figure out what happened and who raised Dean and left that handprint on him, and ends up getting her eyes burnt out. So that seance scene I thought was also confusing and scary, and then just so disturbing when that happened. Um, there's the Christy, who we don't know at first that it's Ruby. She's introduced as Christy. We don't know why Sam was with this girl. We don't know why she says what she says. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. And then later, there's the reveal that it's Ruby. And then lastly, the most memorable scene in Lazarus Rising, and I think one of the most memorable in the whole series, is Castiel's introduction, where he comes walking into the barn and the lights are blowing out and popping and there's sparks all over the place. I mean, I remember seeing that and just being like, oh my God, who is this guy? Who is this creature? He was so scary, and he was so enigmatic, and his like, God has work for you. So like, what? That was just a wonderful scene. In one of the chapters that Misha Collins wrote for one of my books, he talks about how they had a party, and they all got together to watch the season premiere. The actors, Sarah Gamble, I don't know if Eric Kripke was there, but I know Sarah was there. And when that scene came on and they were watching it, Sarah turned to Misha and said, "Your life is never going to be the same." And he said at the time, I thought, that's ridiculous. This is just a little acting job. My life's going to be exactly the same as it ever was. But sure enough, his life was really never the same after that moment. So really, really memorable episode.
Well, yes to all of those things. I mean, even now knowing that Jensen dug his way out of crumbled Oreo cookies instead of dirt, it's still an extremely powerful visual scene. And I got to ask the last question at a convention not too long ago. And so my question was, how come Dean was killed in Connecticut and Rose in Pontiac, Illinois? And Jensen got the most wonderfully poleaxed look on his face as he went for an answer and said, well, that's just because that's where I rose. And then they kind of thought about it. And he finally said, look, the writers come up with these things. Somebody probably had a girlfriend in Pontiac, Illinois. I really don't know. We never asked. But I still don't know why. And I figured out at one time, it was like several days drive from Connecticut to Illinois, why Sam put Dean's body in the back of the Impala and drove for like 4 days to bury him in Illinois, in a town that, as far as I can tell, doesn't have any other significance to them. The other thing that really is interesting, and this goes back to that visual effect of the flattened trees, is that references a real thing called the Tunguska event, which is the largest impact event on Earth in recorded history, although they think there were larger events in prehistoric times. Happened in, I think, Russia.
Russia.
And,
Yep, Russia.
And yeah, so this is what happens when a huge meteor, asteroid, celestial being the size of the Chrysler Building hits the ground in a place. You flatten all the trees. So it does kind of beg wondering, did Cass show up in his celestial form like the Chrysler Building without having adjusted to human mortal size standards and therefore flatten a forest? Maybe. We don't
That would make,
we
that
don't
would
see
make,
Relic Entrances doing this again, so maybe learn from your mistakes. I don't know. What?
that would make sense with the whole thing where Dean is in like the gas station or whatever, and this huge sound is happening and the glass is pulverizing all over him, and he's like this, where Castiel thinks he's trying to talk to Dean, but of course in an angelic vast sense that can't be comprehended by humans and stuff. So that would make sense with that, where he's just like boom,
Angel speaking Enochian isn't exactly like a lullaby or something to soothe somebody to sleep. So yeah, I think there's some cool things. I love it when you can find some of those little Easter eggs that you don't have to know to appreciate a story or a scene, but if you can find them, it's like, ooh, okay, that's cool. I'm nerding out over this. So that is Lazarus Rising. Now let's look at Heaven and Hell. That's that traumatic mid-season finale. Back to you, Carole.
There's so much going on again in this one, where we've spent the first half of the season, we've met Anna and we've met Ruby, and there's a lot of things going on, and the brothers are kind of like together, but like Sam knows that Dean's keeping stuff from him, and being Sam, he's got to keep poking at it, keep pressing that tender spot, because he wants Dean to, of course, unload himself and feel better, because Sam's at that point much more healthy about that kind of thing. But we have the complexity of these two new people on the scene, and we don't get yet, before this episode, kind of what is the significance of these people. But here we find out Anna's an angel, and we know at that point, I believe, that Ruby is a demon. But of course, so Heaven and Hell, it can be, here we've got the dichotomy of these two women, we've got an angel and a demon. And the brothers are kind of polarized a little bit with this. Of course, we also get the very delicious sequence of Anna would like to know the nature of human love. And so we get a beautiful little romantic sequence, and we get to analyze the curve of Dean's back into like some kind of perfect mathematical formula. Yeah. But I digress. So
Steamy windows in the Impala.
steamy windows in the Impala, like the hand. And it's very climactic in the end,
No pun intended.
outside of the Impala, with the angels really making their stance known, and that they're there to push people around to do what they want, and the boys kind of having their first rebellion against that. They're not there to necessarily be a puppet. They're there to do what they feel that needs to be done. So again, a lot going on. The tumblers are rotating and changing, and throwing us into the second half of the season arc, with one kind of really all-encompassing episode.
Okay. Lynn, and I'll just point out that we still have 5 episodes to go, so we're going to have to move fast.
So we
here.
have to talk
I'm
fast.
sorry.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
okay.
Yes, so I like Heaven and Hell. I like where we are in season 4. I really like that Heaven and Hell made both the angels and the demons scary and sort of awesome, and not great, but you feel awe around. Like they really did a good job of, Uriel and Castiel are in this, and the two of them together are really scary. Ruby is very much a demon. That's scary. Sam and Dean are very much caught in the middle of both angels and demons, and they're all scary, and they're all trying to use Sam and Dean and manipulate them for what they want. And I really like how it did that with them. I thought this is one of the first episodes, I think, where there was a sequence that I found really silly. This whole thing about Anna giving up her grace, and they had to go find her grace. And I remember they tracked it to an oak tree. And I literally remember sitting there watching and going, what the hell? Like they had the 4 of them riding in the car with the demon and the angel in the back seat, and then they go to the oak tree to. I was like, you are losing me here. This is extremely silly. I really, I did think that was very good. And up till season 4, there hadn't been very many that I didn't think were really good. But the end of it is so, so, so good when Dean finally breaks down and tells Sam about his time in hell. And we find out to our horror that for him, it was like 40 years. And even more to our horror and his great guilt and shame, after being tortured for all those years, he finally took the offer to get down and stop being tortured if he would torture himself. And we see how torn up he is about it. And it's one of a couple of scenes that Jensen Ackles just absolutely nails that performance, and, sobbing and so emotional. I think that was one of the ones that he kind of had to walk it off afterwards because he got so emotional, but really well done.
Yes to all of that. And Lynn, if I can demystify maybe a little bit about the oak tree. Oak trees have a deep mythic significance in a number of different traditions as being repositories for spirits. So if you were going to stuff a spirit somewhere, an oak tree is a mythologically valid choice. It's associated with a number of different gods. It was sacred to the Druids. It was sacred to Thor. It symbolized strength, courage, and steadfastness. So it's not actually as random as it sounds if you suddenly had a spiritual essence and needed to ditch it somewhere.
I guess it just didn't come off very serious to me. Maybe something about them in that back seat, and they're sort of playing it for laughs, and then they all walk to the tree, and it just it just did not really work for me.
Well, at least they didn't do a sing along in the car.
That is true.
And you have to be kind of deep mythology nerd to go, oh, oak tree, yes. So yeah,
Yeah, that was not
Now
me.
I'm not
now-
sure that was very widely known in the fandom.
now I'm picturing Anna and Ruby singing 99 bottles of beer on the wall.
It had that feel to it. I'm sorry.
And that would have been a great outtake. So Lucifer Rising, we've had Lazarus Rising, we now have Lucifer Rising. And it's the season finale for season 4. Carole?
Oh my gosh, that was a great episode. The whole scene with the priest and the nuns and the bloodletting and the, oh my gosh, Ilchester. And then when the boys are there and Ruby is egging Sam on to kill Lilith, and we don't know at that point that she's a double agent, essentially. And she turns around and slams that door in Dean's face. And Sam has that battle and finds out horribly that he's been played. He's been played. But Dean makes it in. They have that great moment where they realize, uh-oh, it's too late. He's rising, and Sam just reaches out and grabs Dean's jacket, and they are so unified at that moment. Again, all of a sudden that bond is reestablished, and strong. A lot of drama and excitement. We don't know what's going on, and then once we know what's going on, we don't know what's going to happen next. Oh, the excitement. And then again, cast into a summer of like, are we going to find out what happens next? So really, he just ramps it up. Kripke just ramps it up, brings us to that edge, and leaves us gasping, for, oh my gosh, what is happening? What's going to happen next? And our heart is in our throat.
Okay. Lynn?
Kripke both wrote and directed this one. So this really is Kripke, Kripke, Kripke. And even this thinking back over the episode, so much happens in this episode. Like there's a whole novel playing out in this one episode. When it starts out, it comes off of the episode where Sam and Dean had that terrible knockdown drag out fight where Sam nearly strangles Dean and Dean says, if you leave, don't you ever come back? So painful. And in the beginning, Sam is really upset about the fight, and Dean is refusing to call him, and Bobby's saying, you're acting like John, you should be a better man. But the brothers are so estranged, which makes everything that happens so much more painful. And this is the episode where that horrible voicemail happens, which we never really got any canon rectifying of. There's a million fanfics that rectify it, but we never saw it in canon, where Dean actually calls Sam to apologize for the things that he said. But when Sam picks up the voicemail, it's manipulated so that he hears Dean calling him a monster. And that's part of what pushes him to be able to take that step of setting aside his humanity and drinking that possessed woman's blood, killing her, having Ruby kill her. And I remember being shocked that Sam did that, just being absolutely shocked and horrified. But you could see how it came from what had happened before and how he ended up in that place. So it felt so good after that whole arc at the end of it, when Dean finally gets in and together they kill Ruby. And then as Lucifer is rising, they're clinging to each other again instead of being at odds. So I really feel like Kripke took us from complete estrangement to all these horrible things that happen and back to bringing the brothers back together in one episode, which kudos, Kripke. No mean feat.
and has given us a number of interesting side things. One is, as Jared has often joked about, now that his kids are older and want to watch the show, how do you explain why Daddy holds on to Mommy while Uncle Jensen kills her? That's a hard one.
No
Oh, yeah.
trauma there.
No trauma there. The other thing is, of course, Ilchester, they drew on a real place that had a nickname of Hell House College. It was a Roman Catholic monastery where there are varying legends about evil priests doing despicable things and killing people. And it was opened in the 1800s and closed down in the early 1970s and then burned. But it is said to be extremely haunted and evil ground. So there you go, Ilchester, Maryland. I just geek out extremely when they pull in things with real world details. That just makes my little nerdy heart go pitter pat. All right. So we've got season 5, Sympathy for the Devil, The Real Ghostbusters, and Swan Song. And then one more after that, season 6, The Man Who Knew Too Much. Sympathy for the Devil. Start us off, Carole.
Sympathy for the Devil. Now we've come from this really climactic moment, and then it's like Sam and Dean on a plane, and they're like, what are we doing here? What? And then we see this whole story of someone we've never seen before who has suffered a terrible thing where his family has been murdered and everything. But it's all a setup for him to be coerced and persuaded by Lucifer to say yes. Because you know what? Lucifer, as we can easily forget, is an angel. And he can't simply possess anybody. They've established that angels have to ask and you have to say yes. Now they can make it hard for you, but here we really have Lucifer sweet talking Nick into saying yes and pulling all these emotional strings on him and everything. So now we have this new player on the field. We have Lucifer. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what to expect. All we know is that Lucifer is a big, big name. So big stuff's going to happen. We also have this terribly traumatic thing where we have Bobby that we've learned to love and, appreciate as the boys at this point, a surrogate father getting possessed. But yet at the very end, he's able to wrest himself from the demon's possession and injure himself so that the demon leaves, but injured to the point that now Bobby is in a wheelchair. We meet another new player. Well, Zachariah's on the field. We see the beautiful room for the first time. And he's pressuring Dean to say yes to Michael. And again, we have this whole paradigm of angels have to ask. Demons can just take you, but angels have to ask. And so Michael wants Dean to say yes to him. Lucifer wants Nick to say yes to him. We still have this whole heaven and hell dichotomy, but they're really ramping up the stakes now. And again, he's setting up this whole arc for what's going to happen this season. Last season, Lucifer was all theoretical. This season, he's walking, talking, and breathing on the earth. And there's going to be some poop going down.
Okay, Lynn.
Yes, so true. Shout out to Zachariah being a really scary, horrible, beautifully acted, brilliantly written angel. Zachariah, he's really he's pulling out all the stops to try to get Dean to say yes. And it's pretty horrible. He breaks Sam's legs and he says Bobby will never walk again. And then, Sam can't breathe. I mean, it's pretty horrible what the whole, if you got to this point in Supernatural without thinking angels were dicks and really scary, then Zachariah's really out to convince you with what he's doing by this time.
And all with the demeanor of a very smarmy salesman.
Yes, yes, because Kurt Fuller is just so good. He's so good. Nobody else could be Zachariah. He's just so good at it. So memorable. And the other memorable character that's introduced in this episode is Becky. Becky, the avatar for the fandom, who is a fangirl who's writing fan fiction and who is a very passionate fangirl. And this is Kripke. Kripke's the one who wrote Becky this way. And I love the way he wrote Becky. He's writing the same way Kripke writes about everything that he loves, with poking, fun, affection, not there's no barb to it. It's an affectionate poke at fandom. And if you don't see that right away, you can easily see it, because at the end, it's Becky who eventually has the answers to things and kind of gets to save the day a couple episodes down the line. So I really liked the introduction of Becky. It's certainly poking fun at fandom, but I feel like Kripke was doing it in an affectionate way.
Which leads us into the next episode, The Real Ghostbusters, which is the Supernatural Convention. Now, all of us have been to Supernatural conventions. We're all familiar with fan fiction. Only this one had Chuck. So God, right there, although we didn't quite know it yet. And you're right, Becky saves the day because she knows the details. And we also get the two wonderful guys who help Sam and Dean and are cosplaying as them, which is another in-joke to the fandom. And this is just one of my all-time favorite episodes, is that they go to a haunted convention location for a supernatural convention, and a ghost actually shows up. Maybe this is why they tend to favor things like Embassy Suites. Real thing. I've never heard of a haunted Embassy Suites. Carole?
It's really delicious. Again, I think one of the things that is so great about the Kripke written episodes is how he can take, again, so many threads and make them all work together, because we have a case fic, it's a haunted house. We have the creepy, super creepy kids, right? We have the budding romance between Becky and Chuck. We have Sam and Dean meta, where they're like, A, why is this a convention about us? And B, who would want to be us? Only to have that really lovely speech at the end when the cosplay Sam and Dean are like, you're having these exciting events and a brother who would die for you. What's not to love? Why wouldn't you want that? I repair Xerox machines, and that's really wonderful. So all these things going on, a lot of humor. Kripke's so great with the humor. And we have the great German guy who's like, why do they not put the bungee cords on their gun? Or they get the girl who's portraying Letitia, what's her name? And her cell phone starts playing some kind of top 40 song, and she's like, uh-oh. Just really great humorous moments. Chuck is vamping to keep everybody in the room while they're so really fun, fast-paced. I won't say it's a big arc episode at all, but really a stellar moment in both the saga of Sam and Dean and the development of how the fandom was happening at that point, because now season 5 Supernatural's got some momentum going, and they're playing with it, and it's just delicious.
Okay. Lynn?
What I love is that at the time, Kripke was very much on the message boards, which, yes, it was a long time ago. We had message boards back then. He was on Television Without Pity, which was one of the early message boards where the supernatural fandom hung out. And he knew a lot about what was going on in the fandom. This was right around the time that I was interviewing him for the first or second time, and he talked about lurking on the message boards and wanting to know what was going on in the fandom, and then he brilliantly wove it into the episode. So if you were on television without pity, like I was at the time, and watching this episode, you recognize that the cosplayers' names, Demian and Barnes, they were posters. They were real people posting on television without pity. The panels that were there, what were they? Frightened Little Boy, The Secret Life of Dean Winchester. That was like a panel from like a WinCon, like a fan con, the homoerotic subtext of Supernatural. That's what people were talking about on the message board. So he just took those real life things and just tossed them right in there. And people who were on the inside, we all got it. I'm sure the general audience watching, probably all of that went right over their heads. But I love that he wrote it for the insiders, because as a fan himself, he has true affection for those fans that are as into something as he is.
Well, and one of the things I think is really fascinating, I didn't know any of that, Lynn, so thank you. That is a whole different dimension. But with both the musical episode and the convention episode, we have that moment at the end when the fans reveal something to Sam and Dean about themselves, their brotherhood, their purpose that Sam and Dean hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So in the fan fiction musical episode, it's when you have the Carry On song applied to them. And we get the close-up of their faces going, oh my God, I never saw myself and us in that song, but it's totally right. And with, pardon me, with Damian and Barnes at the end of the convention episode, like Carole was saying, dude, you saved the world. I've just got a 9-to-5 forgettable job. Who wouldn't want to be you? And again, you have that paradigm shift you can see on their faces. And I think that's another little brilliant touch of writing, because it would have been so easy to be condescending or snarky, but the fact that this is revelatory, that they're learning something from the fans, is a really nice touch. So we go from the fun of a convention to swan song. Carole?
Absolutely one of my all-time favorite episodes. And I've seen it so many times and I can still tear up during it. Sam says, I'm going to do this. He is ready to cast himself into who knows what. Although actually he kind of knows what, because he knows what Dean went through. He knows Dean spent 40 years in hell. And he knows that he's condemning himself to more than that, like a lifetime, the rest of his natural life, which is like, who knows how many years. And yet he's going to do it, because that's how Sammy works. And Dean is angry, and Dean doesn't want to accept it. And yet Dean shows up. I mean, when he drives into Stull, that's a breathtaking moment. And, you know, when Lucifer Sam is pounding the crap out of him, and we have that brilliant montage, that's breathtaking. We see Castiel explode. We see Bobby explode. We're like, what? You know, Dean is like pulped. And there goes Sam. It's heartbreaking. But at the same time, he's saving the world. And how can you not appreciate that? I think using the Impala the way that Kripke does as the framework for all of this is just brilliant, where he talks about, hey, and the car that came off the lines and we're all ready to hear it's the Impala was not the Impala. It was some other car that nobody remembers now. But then a couple days later, this car came off, and it's the car that like saved the world. So emotional, so tightly focused. There isn't, there's no other players on the scene. There's nothing else happening. It's all zero focused. That's all happened to the episode before. This is zero focused on the cemetery, what's happening, Sam and Dean's struggles, and Dean's refusal to ever let Sam go alone. That he will be there for Sam regardless, and Sam saving the world. It just doesn't get any better than that. And we feel Dean's heartbreak, we feel his loss, we cry along with him. It's just phenomenal. And of course, originally this was set up to possibly be the finale of the series. This was Kripke's master arc, master plan. He planned out those 5 seasons, and for all we knew, again, because you never knew year to year, we were on the bubble, was it going to get picked up? If it hadn't got picked up, it would have been as controversial, I'm sure, as the Barniversary turned out to be, 10 years later. But nonetheless, it made sense. It resolved. It encapsulated everything they were about, and it gave them dignity. And if it had been left there, as much as we might have wanted to see more, at least it made sense and it worked, and we could simply mourn them, but not speculate further.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, it's epic. It's a masterpiece. There's no question. And I think it really encapsulates sort of Kripke's supernatural. Like for Kripke, this is what it was all about. Like the things that Chuck are saying are the things that Kripke is saying about his show and his characters. The important things are what the Winchesters have put into the car through the years. The army men in the ashtray, the Legos in the heating vents, the initials they carved into her. Like that is so emotional and so sentimental, and it makes such a powerful point that it's Sam and Dean's loyalty to each other and love for each other that literally saved the world. This was a test for Sam and Dean. In the end, they chose family. To Kripke, that's what the show was about, and that's what made it so powerful. And that's really punctuated by, we see Chuck near the end as he's sitting at his typewriter, and weirdly he's dressed all in white and he's not disheveled anymore. And I remember being like, what the heck is that Chuck? He looks so different. What's going on? And he says nothing really ends anyway, and then he just types the end and disappears. And I remember at the time all of us being like, huh, what does that mean? Because we didn't know. And then I remember us being, huh, again, when after we get the little montage of Dean's normal life with Lisa, we see Sam outside watching through the window. What the hell? That was a huge cliffhanger to end that season on, because there were so many theories over that hiatus about what might possibly be happening and was that really Sam, etc. So that also was brilliant because it left the fandom very invested for that whole hiatus. We couldn't wait to come back and find out what the hell was going on.
Well, and I'll just add two real life caveats. One is that I've heard Jensen tell the story about how, we got to see Sam beating the living crap out of Dean in style, and he's all, battered and bruised. And apparently Jensen's real life older brother did not take that very well. And Jared just looked at him at the con and said, "Is that why he didn't talk to me for a while?" He really wanted to, he was pretty pissed about anybody messing with his little brother. So I thought that was really charming. The other thing that struck me is Dean shows up for as as far as they've known it this far, Armageddon, the end of everything at Stull, and he does it with badass attitude, rolling in with Def Leppard's Rock of Ages blaring from the Impala. I mean, if you're going to have a showdown with Lucifer, it's a great soundtrack.
That was so Kripke too. So Kripke.
Yeah, that was just perfect. So we have one more of his that he wrote, and that is The Man Who Knew Too Much. Carole?
My favorite part of this episode is the whole Sam part. Uh, Sam's driving along, doesn't know what's going on. These things are happening. And as we come to realize, he's meeting, his wall had been broken, and he's meeting the parts of himself and having to reintegrate them. So, here's the Sam here that was soulless Sam. And here's the integral Sam. And here's the Sam who was in hell and is like really damaged. And all of these Sams have to come back together. And I just thought he portrayed that really brilliantly. And soulless Sam especially is like, he doesn't care. He has no F's to give, and he will do anything to ensure that he's the one who survives. And yet our Sam, because he is so smart, is able to fake him out and bring him back into the fold as well. So that at least we have a Sam who is all of himself. He's a little shaky, shaky on the dismount there. But when he shows up at the end where they're having, Crowley is trying to open purgatory and all of this stuff, Sam at least is there and he's himself. And we at least feel like whatever's going to happen, we have Sam back and we'll deal. So that's my whole favorite part of that episode.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Shout out to Jared Padalecki. They've all talked about how difficult it is, and I can't even really imagine how difficult it is to portray yourself with yourself, because you're having to film one side of it with someone who obviously is not you, but then you have to put yourself in that place and think about that you're responding to the person who was you. I mean, I just think that must be so complicated. And I thought he did such a smooth job of it in this episode that you almost forgot that that was the same actor playing both of those parts. He made the different Sams so identifiably different, even as they were interacting with each other, that you saw them as different incarnations, and it was almost hard to remember, oh, that's still Jared Padalecki doing both of those things. And it also, again, gave the narrative a chance for Sam to emphasize, like, I'm not leaving my brother out there alone. Like, this again, that's what the power of the show is, according to Kripke. And every time he writes an episode, it reiterates that bond between Sam and Dean was the whole point. It's what made them able to do the incredible things that they were able to do. So I think that's what stands out for that one.
And so important, especially after the end, as the end of this episode, where we had them so at odds, because Sam wasn't Sam for so many episodes. And, Dean is dealing with the fact his brother ostensibly is there, but it's not really his brother. And then gets to have him back, and they get to re-solidify that bond.
Which Jensen will endlessly complain about, because I feel like it was almost as hard for Jensen Ackles as it was for Dean Winchester not to have the person who he was used to as his partner.
Well, one of the things that I thought was really brilliant about this, and Lynn, you'd know the technical terminology for it, but there is a form of therapy in which you reintegrate the parts of self that you have split off to deal with trauma. So the wounded child, or maybe the part of self that you had to lock down emotions to get you through something. And it's not split personality at all. It's coming up with parts of yourself to do battle for the parts that are weaker to defend yourself. And if you've ever done that kind of therapy, watching Sam reintegrate those pieces of himself was really powerful because people really do, not quite as dramatically as on TV, but that is a psychological survival technique to split
It
off.
happens with trauma, that the
Yes.
trauma memories are never integrated into the main life narrative. So that's always part of the work.
Yes. So I thought that was really powerful. The other thing, and I keep coming back to convention questions, but at a recent convention, I got to ask a question. At some point, I'm going to have my face on a wanted poster. Don't pick this lady. But my question was to Jensen, in light of Cass's confession at the end of season 15, does knowing that make you question his motives for all the things he did up to that point, like breaking Sam's wall to get Sam out of the way so that he could monopolize Dean's friendship or relationship or whatever you want to call it. And Jensen listened very carefully, like he does, and then he went, "What?" When you were there, Carole, I think you were too, and um, and then he had me say it over again, and he was very nice to say that he really did not think that Cass would have ever done anything to harm Sam, knowing how much Dean cared about Sam. I think that was a very polite answer. I'm not sure it fits with my headcanon, but it is what Jensen said, so we'll believe him. Well, folks, we are out of time. It has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. And very quickly, before we leave, please tell us where we can find you online. Carole?
You can find me on Facebook in the Continual Facebook group and the SPN TFW group that Gail runs on many, many, many continual panels. As Ellis Colton, you can also find me on Facebook, and all my social media links are at elliscolton.carrd.co. And my latest book is in fact, a paranormal mystery, The Case of Thistledown House, available now on Amazon.
Okay, Lynn?
You can find me on all social media at FangasmSPN. That now includes Blue Sky, where I'm there under the same name. You can find my books, including Family Don't End with Blood and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, that have chapters written by the actors, on Amazon, at your local bookstore, or all the information about them is at peacewhenyouaredone.com.
And I'm pretty easy to find online at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. If you spell those right, you'll find me on pretty much all the social media sites. And also running the Supernatural TFWNC group, which is a fan group on Facebook, as well as here on Continual. So thank you both so much for a fantastic panel. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.